The warning lights on Commander Taemin's ship flashed red as another star system went dark. He stared at the empty space where the Kalor colony had been just hours before. No explosion, no debris, no distress signals. The entire system had simply stopped existing. "Sir, that's the 15th system this week," his communications officer reported, her voice shaking. Taemin nodded grimly. The Altari defense fleet had patrolled these outer regions for decades, but nothing in their training had prepared them for this. The Altari Federation ruled 847 worlds across the galaxy. For 3,000 years, they had maintained peace through superior technology and careful diplomacy. Their ships could reshape matter at will. Their weapons could crack planets. Their cities floated in space, powered by captured starlight. They were the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. None of that mattered now. "Take us to the next system," Taemin ordered. "We need to see what's happening." The ship jumped through hyperspace in seconds, emerging near the Voltan mining colonies. Taemin expected to find busy cargo ships and orbital refineries. Instead, he found nothing, not even empty space, just a void where the system should have been, as if it had never existed at all. Back on Nexus Prime, the Federation capital, Dr. Sora worked frantically in her laboratory. As the Federation's top scientist, she had been studying the disappearances for weeks. Her screen showed maps of the galaxy with growing patches of absolute emptiness spreading inward from the rim. "It's not destruction," she muttered to her assistant. "Destruction leaves traces. This is something else entirely." Her research team had analyzed thousands of sensor readings, looking for any pattern. The vanished systems left no gravitational shadows, no radiation signatures, no quantum echoes. It was as if they had been completely removed from reality itself. "Doctor, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim," her assistant announced. "It's from the exploration ship Farseeker." The message was broken and filled with static, but the words chilled Sora to her core. "We found them. The ones responsible. They don't destroy, they erase. Everything just stops being. We're trying to escape, but space itself is." The transmission cut off. When Sora checked the ship's location, she found empty space where the Farseeker had been. Across the galaxy, panic began to spread. Trade routes that had operated for centuries suddenly led to nowhere. Entire sectors of space became impossible to navigate because the stars that marked them no longer existed. Billions of refugees fled toward the galactic core, but the void followed them. The Altari High Council met in emergency session. Admiral Hyun-woo, head of the defense fleet, presented their military options. "We've lost contact with 30% of our outer territories," he reported. "Our fastest ships can't outrun whatever this is. Our most powerful weapons have no effect." "What exactly are we fighting?" demanded Counselor Yoon Seo. Dr. Sora stepped forward with her findings. "Based on the data we've collected, I believe we're facing something that exists outside normal physics. They don't just kill or destroy. They make things never have existed in the first place. I'm calling them the Devourers." The council chamber fell silent. These beings had ruled the galaxy for millennia, had faced wars and disasters and cosmic threats, but they had never encountered an enemy that could simply erase them from existence. "How long do we have?" asked the council leader. Sora's calculations were terrifying. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach the core worlds within days, maybe less. Admiral Hyun-woo activated the holographic display showing their military forces. "I'm deploying every available ship to the outer defensive lines. If we can slow them down—" "With what?" interrupted another counselor. "You said our weapons don't work against them. Then we'll ram them. We'll use our ships as missiles. We'll throw asteroids, debris, anything we can, against an enemy that makes our ships never have existed." Sora shook her head. "Admiral, I don't think you understand. These beings don't fight battles. They don't engage in combat. They simply arrive, and then everything in that area ceases to exist. Not destroyed, not killed. It becomes like it was never there at all." Commander Taemin's ship limped back to Nexus Prime with the last refugees from the Outer Rim. He had watched entire fleets disappear in seconds. The Devourers appeared as shifting shadows in space, impossible to focus on directly. When they touched a ship, a planet, a star, it simply vanished from reality. "How do you fight something like that?" he asked Dr. Sora when he arrived. "I don't know," she admitted. "Every civilization we know of has tried to fight them with force, with technology, with strategy. None of it works. The Devourers seem to exist on a level of reality that our science can't touch. The refugee camps on Nexus Prime overflowed with survivors. Beings from dozens of species huddled together, all telling the same impossible story. Their homeworlds hadn't been destroyed. They had simply stopped being real. Family members, friends, entire populations had been erased not just from existence but from memory itself. As the days passed, the situation grew worse. Long-range sensors detected the Devourers moving through the middle regions of the galaxy. Entire star clusters winked out of existence. The great trade worlds that had been the backbone of galactic civilization simply ceased to be. Admiral Hyunwoo made one last desperate attempt to stop them. He gathered every remaining ship in the defense fleet and positioned them in the Nexus system's outer reaches. When the Devourers arrived, he ordered a full assault. The battle lasted exactly 37 seconds. Then the entire fleet was gone, erased from reality as if it had never existed. Only the automated defense satellites witnessed their disappearance, and their recordings showed the ship simply fading away like mirages. Dr. Sora worked around the clock, searching through ancient databases for any reference to the Devourers. Most civilizations had no records of them. They had been completely erased. But in the oldest archives she found fragments, scattered references to the hunger that eats existence itself and the darkness between thoughts. On the final day, before the Devourers reached Nexus Prime, Sora made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the most restricted files, she found records of other galactic civilizations that had faced this threat before. All had fallen except for one small notation that made her heart race. There was one species, she told the remaining council members. According to these fragments, one species that encountered the Devourers and survived. They're called humans, from a world named Earth, in the outer spiral arm. "Never heard of them," muttered Counselor Yunseo. "The records are incomplete, but they suggest these humans found a way to resist erasure from existence. They might be our only hope." As if to emphasize the urgency, another batch of star systems vanished from the edge of the Nexus system. The Devourers would arrive within hours. The greatest civilization in galactic history was about to become nothing more than empty space and fading memories. The last meeting of the Altari High Council took place in an underground bunker beneath Nexus Prime. Above them, the planet's surface crackled with energy shields that everyone knew would be useless against the Devourers. Dr. Sora stood before the handful of survivors, holding a data pad with humanity's location. "This is insane," declared Admiral Hyunwoo, his uniform torn from the evacuation. "We're talking about a species we've never contacted. They might not even exist anymore." "The records are 300 years old," agreed Counselor Yunseo. "Even if these humans are real, they're probably primitive. What could they do that we cannot?" Dr. Sora pulled up the fragmentary files she'd found. The archives mentioned that humans faced the void that consumes hope, and somehow prevailed. That has to be the Devourers. No other threat matches that description. Engineer Boram, one of the Federation's brightest minds, shook his head. "Doctor, their homeworld is in the opposite direction from the Devourer advance. Even if we could reach them, even if they wanted to help, by the time we return, the entire galaxy will be gone." The truth hung heavy in the air. Their fastest ship would take weeks to reach Earth. The Devourers would consume Nexus Prime within hours. "There might be a way," Sora said quietly. "My analysis of the Devourers suggests they don't just move through space, they move through causality itself. They're unraveling the timeline as they advance." Admiral Hyunwoo frowned. "What does that mean?" "Time moves differently in areas they've affected. What seems like hours here might be days, weeks, or even months in regions they haven't touched yet. If we can reach the humans before the Devourers arrive in their sector, We might have more time than we think. The plan was desperate beyond reason. Take their fastest remaining ship, the Eternal Dawn, and race across the galaxy to find a species that might not exist, to ask for help against an enemy that couldn't be fought, with time that might not be real. I volunteer to lead the mission, said Captain Jinho, stepping forward. He commanded the Eternal Dawn and had lost his entire family when their homeworld was erased. If there's even a chance these humans can help, we have to try. The Council voted unanimously. What choice did they have? The Eternal Dawn launched just as the first of our scouts appeared at the edge of the Nexus system. Dr. Sora watched from the ship's observation deck as her homeworld grew smaller behind them. She wondered if she would ever see it again, or if it would still exist when she returned. The journey to Earth took 2 weeks of constant hyperspace jumps. Captain Jinho pushed the ship beyond its limits, knowing that every hour might be crucial. The crew worked in shifts, monitoring long-range communications for any word from the core worlds. On the 10th day, all transmissions from Nexus Prime stopped. It could be communication interference, suggested Navigator Hyejin, but her voice lacked conviction. They all knew what the silence meant. The heart of their civilization had been erased from existence. Dr. Sora spent her time studying every scrap of information about humans. The records were frustratingly incomplete. Earth was described as a death world with extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, and unstable geology. The humans were noted as being unusually aggressive and adaptable, but also primitive by galactic standards. They still use chemical rockets for space travel, she told Captain Jinho. Their fastest ships barely reach the edge of their own star system. Their weapons are kinetic projectiles and explosive devices. By our standards, they're barely past the Stone Age. Then why do the records suggest they defeated the Devourers? Jinho asked. I don't know. Maybe the records are wrong. Maybe we're chasing ghosts while our people die. On the 14th day, they reached the Sol system. Earth hung before them, a blue and white marble orbiting a yellow star. The planet looked peaceful, even beautiful. But Dr. Sora's instruments detected something that made her heart skip. Captain, I'm reading orbital defense platforms, hundreds of them. Their technology is crude, but their coverage is complete. They've militarized their entire star system. Before Captain Jinho could respond, their communications board lit up. A voice spoke in accented but clear galactic standard. Unknown vessel, this is Earth Defense Command. State your identity and purpose or you will be fired upon. The Altari crew exchanged glances. How did primitive humans learn their language? How did they detect a ship using advanced stealth technology? This is Captain Jinho of the Altari Federation vessel Eternal Dawn. We come seeking an audience with your leaders on a matter of galactic importance. There was a long pause. Then a different voice, older and somehow weary. Altari Federation, from the core worlds. The Devourers found you too, didn't they? Dr. Sora felt her blood turn cold. These humans knew about the Devourers. Permission granted to approach Earth, the voice continued. Dock with Station Unity. Admiral Yunji will meet with you personally. Earth's orbital stations were a patchwork of different technologies, some clearly scavenged from other species. But they worked, and the humans manning them moved with military precision. Captain Jinho noticed that every human they saw carried weapons even in civilian areas. Admiral Yunji was a small woman with gray hair and scars on her hands. She met them in a conference room that looked more like a bunker than a diplomatic facility. Maps covered the walls, showing star charts that extended far beyond what humans should have been able to explore. You're the first survivors we've met from the core regions, she said without preamble. How many made it out? Survivors? Dr. Sora asked. Admiral, we're here seeking your help. The Devourers are destroying our civilization. We found records suggesting your species encountered them before. Admiral Unji smiled grimly. Encountered them? Son, we've been fighting them for over 200 years. The revelation hit the Altari delegation like a physical blow. Humans had been at war with the Devourers for centuries, while the advanced civilizations of the galaxy remained oblivious. The first scout ships arrived in 2387, Yunji explained. Small things, probing our reality, testing our will to exist. Most species they touched simply gave up. Decided existence was too much trouble, but humans. She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Humans got angry. Dr. Sora leaned forward. How do you fight them? Our most advanced weapons can't even touch them. That's because you're thinking like civilized beings, Admiral Yunji replied. You're trying to fight them with logic, with science, with technology. The devourers exist in the spaces between thoughts. In the moment when hope dies, you can't defeat them with weapons. Then how? Captain Jinho demanded. You fight them with pure human stubbornness. You refuse to accept that they're unbeatable. You look at impossible odds and say, watch me. You take everything that makes logical sense and throw it out the airlock. Admiral Yunji activated a holographic display showing Earth's defenses. The Altari saw weapons that violated physics, shields that shouldn't work, ships designed by engineers who apparently didn't understand their own limitations. We've lost 13 billion people learning how to fight them, Yunji continued. But we learned, and now we're ready. Ready for what? Dr. Sora asked. To end this war. We've been preparing for 2 centuries, waiting for the devourers to make their final push into the galactic core. Once they consume enough civilized species, once they grow strong enough, they'll come for Earth. And when they do, we'll be ready. Captain, Jinho felt a chill run down his spine. Admiral, you don't understand. They've already consumed the core worlds. Nexus Prime is gone. The entire Federation has been erased. Admiral Yunji nodded slowly. Then it's time. Captain, your people are welcome to remain here under Earth's protection. But we're going to war. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the station. A communications officer rushed into the room with a report that made Admiral Yunji smile like a predator. Ma'am, long-range sensors detect devourer forces moving toward the Centauri colonies. They'll be in our space within 48 hours. Perfect timing, the Admiral said. Send word to all fleets. Operation. Stubborn Bastard is now active. It's time to show these cosmic horrors what happens when they mess with humanity. The human fleet that assembled around Earth defied everything Dr. Sora knew about space warfare. Their ships looked like they were built from scrap metal and determination. Engines that shouldn't work pushed hulls that shouldn't fly, carrying weapons that shouldn't function, yet somehow impossibly they did. This is insane, she whispered to Captain Jinho as they watched the preparation from Station Unity's observation deck. Those ships will fall apart the moment they enter hyperspace. Admiral Yunji overheard her comment and chuckled. Doctor, you're thinking like an engineer. Our ships don't work because they're well designed. They work because we refuse to let them fail. The human fleet numbered in the thousands. Each ship was different, as if built by separate teams who had never communicated with each other. Some were sleek and fast, others were massive and heavily armored. Many looked like they had been welded together from the wreckage of other vessels. How long have you been building this fleet? Captain Jinho asked. 200 years, replied Commander Wu Jin, a young human with old eyes. Every ship represents a human colony that refused to give up. Every weapon is forged from our absolute refusal to be erased. Dr. Sora studied the tactical displays. The approaching devourer force was massive, larger than anything that had attacked the core worlds. Admiral, our intelligence suggests this is their main fleet. If they're coming here, it means they're confident of victory. Good, Admiral Yunji said simply. Confident enemies make mistakes. The Altari refugees aboard Station Unity watched nervously as the human fleet departed. Ships that looked like flying junkyards somehow achieved faster than light travel. Engines that should have exploded instead opened portals to hyperspace. It was like watching physics give up and let humanity do whatever it wanted. Captain Jinho found himself assigned to a human battle group commanded by General Kiwan. The elderly soldier welcomed him aboard the flagship Defiance with typical human directness. Captain, I know your people are advanced. I know your ships are better designed than ours, but out here engineering doesn't matter. What matters is whether you believe your ship will keep flying when reality says it shouldn't. The first battle took place near the Centauri colonies. The Devourers arrived as they always did, as shifting shadows in space that hurt to look at directly. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never faced real resistance. Dr. Sora watched from the eternal dawn as the human fleet engaged. She expected to witness humanity's noble but futile sacrifice, the same tragic end that had befallen every other species that challenged the Devourers. Instead, she saw something that broke her understanding of the universe. The Devourers attacked, as they always did, reaching out with reality-warping tendrils to erase their enemies from existence. Human ships began to fade, their crews and weapons dissolving into nothingness. For a moment, Dr. Sora thought the battle was over before it began. Then the humans did something unprecedented. They refused to be erased. Ships that had been fading back into existence, their crews somehow pulling themselves back from non-existence through sheer willpower. Weapons that had been negated fired anyway, their projectiles hitting targets that technically no longer existed. How is this possible? Dr. Sora gasped. Commander Wu Jin's voice crackled over the communications channel. Because we said so. Devourers, meet the one species in the galaxy too stupid to know when we're beaten. The battle that followed defied every law of physics Dr. Sora knew. Human ships rammed through Devourer formations, their hulls somehow solid enough to damage. Beings made of living void. Human crews fired at enemies they couldn't see, hitting targets their sensors couldn't detect, using weapons that shouldn't work in the twisted space around the Devourers. Most impossibly of all, they were winning. For the first time in eons, the Devourers seemed confused. These cosmic entities that consumed civilizations found themselves facing an enemy that grew more determined the more hopeless the situation became. Sir, reported a human communications officer, Devourer forces are pulling back from Sector 7. They seem to be regrouping. General Kiwan grinned fiercely. Regrouping, that's the first smart thing they've done. Too bad we're not going to let them. The human fleet pursued the retreating Devourers with relentless fury. Ships that should have been destroyed hours ago continued fighting, held together by hull patches, emergency welds, and pure human stubbornness. Dr. Sora found herself working alongside human scientists to understand what was happening. Dr. Da Yun, Earth's leading expert on the Devourers, explained it in terms that hurt her brain. The Devourers exist in the conceptual space where hope dies, she said. They feed on despair, on the moment when a species accepts that defeat is inevitable. But humans have a unique response to inevitable defeat. Which is? Dr. Sora asked. We get angry and decide to beat it anyway. We don't just refuse to give up. We refuse to acknowledge that giving up is even an option. It creates a kind of conceptual feedback loop that disrupts their ability to erase us. The second battle took place in the ruins of the Vega system. The Devourers had learned from their first defeat and came prepared with new tactics. They tried to erase not just the human ships, but the very concepts of courage and determination that powered them. It didn't work. Sir, they're trying some kind of mental attack, reported the sensor operator aboard the Defiance. They're attempting to erase the idea of resistance itself. General Kiwan looked puzzled. Erase the idea of resistance? From humans? He burst into laughter. Boys, I think they just made their biggest mistake yet. The human response to having their capacity for resistance erased was to resist even harder. Crews who had been pacified by Devourer mind attacks suddenly broke free with doubled fury. Ships that had been drifting helplessly roared back to life as their crews decided that surrender was for other species. Captain Jinho watched in amazement as human tactics evolved in real time. They didn't try to match the Devourer's reality-warping abilities. Instead, they treated the laws of physics like suggestions and proceeded to ignore them whenever convenient. This is impossible, he said to Commander Wu Jin. Your people are fighting beings that exist outside normal reality using crude weapons and ships held together with metal tape. That's the point, Wu Jin replied. The Devourers expect their enemies to fight by the rules, but humans wrote our own rulebook, and the first rule is, if something says you can't win, prove it wrong by winning anyway. By the end of the third day, the impossible was happening across multiple star systems. The Devourer advance, unstoppable for eons, had not only been halted but was being pushed back. Human fleets pursued retreating enemies through twisted space, following them into dimensions where matter shouldn't exist, and time flowed backward. Dr. Sora received reports that defied belief. Human marines had somehow boarded Devourer vessels, structures that existed partially outside reality, and engaged in hand-to-hand combat with entities made of living void. The Marines were winning. How do you fight something that doesn't technically exist? She asked Dr. Dayun. Very carefully, the human scientist replied. And with really big guns. Also, it helps to be too angry to care about the philosophical implications. As the human fleet prepared for the next phase of the campaign, Dr. Sora realized she was witnessing something that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. Humanity hadn't just found a way to fight the Devourers. They had somehow made the impossible logical and the unthinkable routine. Admiral Yunji's final message of the day summed up the human approach. To all Devourer forces, you picked the wrong species to mess with. We've been dealing with impossible odds since we crawled out of the caves. Consider this your formal notice to quit. The war had been raging for 3 months when the first refugee ships from other species began arriving in human space. Captain Subin commanded one of the few surviving Altari vessels, her crew exhausted from weeks of running from the Devourers. She expected to find Earth's solar system consumed like all the others. Instead, she found a thriving military headquarters coordinating attacks across half the galaxy. This is impossible, she whispered, as her ship approached Earth. The planet showed no signs of siege or desperation. If anything, it looked more vibrant than when she had left months earlier. New orbital structures gleamed in the sunlight, and the constant flow of ships suggested a civilization at the height of its power. Admiral Yunji greeted the refugee convoy personally. Welcome to Earth, Captain Subin. I'm sorry for the loss of your homeworld, but I have good news. We're winning. The Altari captain stared at her in disbelief. Winning? Admiral, the Devourers have consumed 3/4 of the galaxy. Entire sectors have been erased from existence. How can you possibly be winning? Because we changed the rules of the game, Admiral Yunji replied. Come, let me show you something. The war room beneath Earth's surface had become the nerve center for the largest military operation in galactic history. Holographic displays showed battlefronts across dozens of star systems. Human fleets engaged Devourer forces in regions that hadn't seen life in millions of years. The key breakthrough came when we stopped trying to fight them conventionally, explained Dr. Dayun. We realized that the Devourers exist in conceptual space. They're not just physical beings. They're ideas made manifest. The idea of inevitable, defeat, of hopelessness, of the heat death of the universe. General Kiwan pointed to a tactical display. So we started using conceptual weapons against them. Instead of plasma cannons, we fire concentrated stubbornness. Instead of shields, we use weapons-grade optimism. And our most effective weapon? Which is? Captain Subin asked. Pure human spite. We looked at beings that had erased entire galactic civilizations and said, yeah, well, we don't like you either. The explanation sounded insane, but Captain Subin couldn't argue with the results. The displays showed Devourer forces in full retreat across multiple fronts. Systems that had been erased were somehow returning to existence, their stars reigniting and their planets reforming. Commander Wu Jin arrived with the latest battle reports. His ship, the Stubborn, looked like it had been through a meat grinder, but he wore the biggest grin Subin had ever seen on a warrior. Ma'am, the Rigel offensive was a complete success. We've pushed the Devourers completely out of the sector. Lieutenant Park says her Marines actually made one of them cry. Cry? Dr. Sora asked. She had been studying Devourer biology for months and had never seen evidence they possessed emotions. Well, more like leak existential dread, Wu Jin clarified, but Park counted it as tears. She's very proud. Captain Subin found herself assigned to a joint task force with humans and refugees from a dozen other species. Her ship, the Last Hope, became part of a battle group commanded by Colonel Yun Ho, a human who had been fighting the Devourers since he was a teenager. Captain, I know your people are used to sophisticated tactics, he told her during their first briefing. Formation fighting, careful positioning, coordinated strikes. We do things differently. How so? Subin asked. We charge straight at them while yelling really loudly. It's surprisingly effective. The first joint operation took place in the Arcturus system, where a massive devourer fortress had been consuming nearby star systems for weeks. The human plan was typically direct. Ram through their defenses, board their installation, and convince them to stop existing through vigorous application of explosives. This is suicide, Captain Subin protested as they approached the fortress. That structure exists in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Our ships can't even target it properly. Watch and learn, Colonel Yunho replied cheerfully. The human. Assault ships hit the Devourer fortress like meteors. Instead of being erased from existence, they somehow punched holes through its reality-warping defenses. Subin watched in amazement as human marines poured out of boarding craft and began fighting hand-to-hand with entities made of living darkness. How are they surviving in there? She asked Dr. Dayun. By refusing to accept that they can't, came the reply. Humans have this wonderful ability to ignore things that should kill them. The Marines are fighting in a space where biological life is conceptually impossible, so they just decided to be conceptually impossible right back. The battle inside the fortress was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human soldiers fought beings of pure entropy using weapons that fired concentrated determination. They planted explosives in dimensions that didn't technically exist and somehow made them explode anyway. Most remarkably, they were winning. Captain Subin monitored the communications as human teams secured section after section of the fortress. Their reports were a mixture of military professionalism and cheerful insanity. Section 7 is secure. Enemies neutralized through aggressive disagreement with their existence. Engineering deck captured. We convinced their power source to work for us instead. It seemed lonely. Command center taken. Their leader wants to negotiate. Permission to tell it where to stick its offer? Within 6 hours, the fortress that had consumed entire star systems was flying human flags and broadcasting Earth military frequencies. A structure that existed outside normal reality had somehow been converted into a human naval base. How did you do that? Captain Subin asked Colonel Yunho. We asked nicely, he replied. Well, we asked at gunpoint while threatening to blow up their conceptual framework, but it was still asking. The victory at Arcturus marked a turning point in the war. Devourer forces that had seemed unstoppable began avoiding human fleets entirely. Ancient entities that had consumed galaxies found themselves outmaneuvered by species that had learned to fly less than 1,000 years earlier. Dr. Sora worked frantically to understand the implications. The humans aren't just defeating the Devourers, she told Captain Subin. They're changing the fundamental nature of reality itself. Areas where human forces operate seem to become more stable, more real, as if their presence reinforces the concept of existence itself. Reports came in from across the galaxy. Star systems that had been erased were flickering back into existence. Planets thought lost forever were reforming around their original stars. Species that had been completely eliminated were somehow returning from non-existence. It's like the universe is remembering things it was forced to forget, Dr. Dayun explained. Human presence seems to act as a kind of reality anchor. We're so stubbornly convinced that things should exist that we're forcing them to exist again. The strategic situation transformed rapidly. Instead of a desperate defense, the war became a systematic liberation campaign. Human fleets pushed deeper into devourer-controlled space, restoring erased systems and freeing species that had been trapped in conceptual limbo. Captain Subin found herself serving alongside humans who treated impossible odds as a personal challenge. They flew ships that shouldn't work, used weapons that violated physics, and won battles through sheer bloody-minded refusal to lose. I don't understand your people, she told Colonel Yunho after another impossible victory. That's okay, he replied. We don't understand us either. We just keep doing what works. As the 4th month of the war began, the unthinkable was happening. The Devourer advance had not only been stopped but reversed. For the first time in cosmic history, the entities that fed on hopelessness found themselves facing a species that treated hopelessness as an invitation to try harder. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity did what no civilization had ever accomplished. They made the unstoppable force meet an immovable object and somehow convinced both to get along. The final battle for the galaxy began when humanity's deep space scouts discovered the source. Hidden in a region of space that existed outside normal dimensions, the Devourer homeworld pulsed with dark energy that made reality itself feel sick. "It's beautiful in the worst possible way," reported Commander Wu Jin from his reconnaissance ship. "Imagine if someone took the concept of nothingness and made it into a planet. It hurts to look at, but I can't stop looking." Admiral Yunji studied the sensor data from Earth's command center. The source existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, protected by defensive systems that could erase entire fleets from causality. Any conventional attack would be impossible. Fortunately, humanity had given up on conventional attacks months ago. "General Ki-wan, how many ships can we spare for a direct assault?" she asked. "All of them," the grizzled veteran replied without hesitation. "Every human vessel in the galaxy, plus all our alien allies who've been crazy enough to learn our fighting style." Captain Subin felt her stomach drop. In the months since joining the human war effort, she had seen impossible victories and reality-defying tactics, but this seemed too much even for humanity. "Admiral, that facility exists outside normal space-time. Our ships can't even reach it, let alone damage it." "That's what makes it perfect," Admiral Yunji replied with a smile that worried Subin. "The Devourers chose the most impossible place to defend because they assumed no one would be crazy enough to attack it. They didn't account for humans." Dr. Sora had spent weeks studying the source with human scientists. Their findings defied everything she knew about physics, biology, and sanity. "The facility doesn't just house the Devourers," she reported. "It is them. Every Devourer in the galaxy is connected to this central consciousness. Destroy it and we destroy them all." "And how exactly do we destroy something that exists in a realm where destruction is conceptually impossible?" asked Dr. Dayun. "The same way we've done everything else," replied Colonel Yunho. "We ignore the conceptual impossibility and do it anyway." The assault fleet that assembled for the final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships flew alongside vessels from dozens of refugee species, all retrofitted with weapons that worked on principles their designers didn't fully understand. The fleet motto, painted on every hull, read, "Logic is for other species." "Captain." Subin found herself commanding a mixed squadron of human and Altari vessels. Her crews had learned to think like humans over the past months, which meant they had stopped thinking entirely and started relying on pure stubbornness. "Remember," she told her pilots, "when we enter that dimensional rift, physics will try to tell us we don't exist. Our response is to exist even harder." The journey to the source required traveling through layers of twisted space-time that drove most species insane. Human crews treated it like a particularly bumpy road trip, playing music and making jokes about the laws of reality breaking down around them. "Sir, we're entering the 7th dimension," reported Navigator Hyejin. "Our instruments say we stopped existing about 5 minutes ago." "Note that in the log," Colonel Yunho replied calmly. "Also note that we're still here anyway, so clearly, our instruments need calibrating." As they approached the source, the Devourer defenses activated. Reality-warping weapons reached out to erase the attacking fleet from existence. Ships began to fade as their crews and equipment were systematically negated from causality. Then humanity did what it did best. It got angry. "All ships, this is Admiral Yunji." Her voice crackled across all frequencies. "They're trying to make us not exist. I find this personally offensive. Show them how we feel about that." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships that had been fading back into existence through sheer spite, crews that had been erased, pulled themselves back from nothingness by refusing to accept they were gone. Weapons that shouldn't work, in this dimensional space, fired anyway, hitting targets that technically weren't there. Captain Subin watched in amazement as her own ship, the Last Hope, somehow became more real as the Devourers tried to erase it. Her Altari crew, trained by months of human insanity, responded to existence-negating attacks by existing louder. Engineering reports our reality coefficient is holding steady at definitely, announced her chief engineer with the kind of professional calm that only came from extended exposure to human military doctrine. The battle for the source was fought on levels that most species couldn't even perceive. Human Marines somehow teleported inside a facility that existed outside spacetime and began setting explosives in rooms that weren't technically there. Fighter pilots engaged devourer entities in aerial combat through dimensions where the concept of air had been abolished. General Ki Wan led the main assault personally, commanding from the bridge of the Absolutely Not. His ship punched through dimensional barriers that should have been impenetrable, its hull somehow remaining solid despite existing in 17 contradictory states simultaneously. "Sir, we've reached the core chamber," reported his communications officer. "The Marines have found the central consciousness. It's asking for terms of surrender." "Terms?" Ki Wan laughed. "Tell it the terms are simple. Stop existing, and we'll consider not being angry about the whole galaxy-eating thing." Dr. Sora monitored the assault from the command ship, watching sensors that showed impossible things happening in impossible places. Human soldiers were fighting the concept of entropy itself, and somehow winning through applied stubbornness. "This shouldn't work," she muttered to Dr. Dayun. "They're fighting abstract concepts with conventional weapons in a space where conventional physics don't apply." "That's the point," Dayun replied. "Humans have this unique ability to make the impossible seem routine. We're not fighting the devourers with superior technology or ancient wisdom. We're beating them with weaponized refusal to accept limitations." The turning point came when Sergeant Minsu, a human Marine who had been fighting the devourers since the war began, somehow convinced the source's central consciousness to feel guilty about consuming entire civilizations. The entity that had devoured galaxies found itself on the receiving end of a lecture about proper behavior. "You see," Minsu explained patiently while holding the cosmic horror at gunpoint. "Eating people's planets is rude. My mother raised me better than that. And I'm pretty sure the universe raised you better too." Within hours, the impossible had happened. The source, a facility that existed outside normal reality and housed the consciousness of beings that fed on hopelessness itself, surrendered to a species that had learned to fly less than 1,000 years earlier. The devourers didn't just retreat, they apologized. The ancient entities that had consumed civilizations for eons found themselves genuinely sorry for the trouble they had caused. They began actively restoring the systems they had erased, bringing back entire species from conceptual non-existence. Captain Subin stood on the bridge of her ship as star systems flickered back into reality across the galaxy. Planets she had watched die were reforming around their original stars. Species thought lost forever were returning from wherever erased things went. "How did we do this?" she asked Colonel Yunho as they watched the Altari homeworld materialize in the distance. "Simple," he replied. "We looked at impossible odds and decided they weren't our problem. Then we made them everyone else's problem instead." The war officially ended when the last devourer formally apologized to the Galactic Council for the inconvenience and offered to help rebuild everything they had consumed. The entities that had once fed on despair found themselves oddly fulfilled by construction projects and humanitarian aid. Dr. Sora's final report to the restored Galactic Archive became the most read document in galactic history. Humanity defeated the devourers not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through the simple refusal to accept that defeat was possible. When faced with cosmic entities that could erase the concept of existence itself, humans responded by existing louder. Admiral Yunji's comment in the official records was simpler. "They said it couldn't be done. We took that personally." As the Yoi galaxy began to rebuild, one fact became clear to every species. When the universe ended, the smart money was on humanity to argue with the heat death until it agreed to start over. Because humans had learned the most important lesson in cosmic history. The universe doesn't get to tell you what's impossible until you try it first. The memorial to the war's victims bore a simple inscription suggested by humanity. Hope faded. Millions perished, then humanity answered the call. Next time, try asking nicely first.